In this demonstration, we're going to work with the ifconfig command to manage IP addressing on a Linux system. Let's open a terminal window on our Linux system. Let's go to Search Your Computer and select Terminal from these choices. I could also search the system for terminal if it didn't show up in the list. Now, before we get started, be aware that on some newer releases of Linux, ifconfig and the rest of the NetTools have been replaced by the new IP Route 2 set of utilities. So instead of typing ifconfig to find the IP address of your computer, you type ipaddr. On my Linux system, I have already installed the old tools by entering the command sudo apt install net-tools to install the NetTools utilities. Now let's get back to ifconfig. ifconfig is a lot like ipconfig on a Windows workstation. Now notice that I'm currently logged in as my dfellows user. dfellows is a standard user, not a super user. I could run the ifconfig command at the command prompt, and I'd be able to view IP configuration information, but I couldn't modify it. If you want to use ifconfig to modify configuration info, then you have to switch to your root user account first. I'll use the sudo command to switch to root. Now I'll use ifconfig. I'll type my password, and now I can do whatever I want on this system. After we type ifconfig, we see that two interfaces are displayed. We have the eth0 interface and we have the LO interface. This interface up here is your wired or wireless network interface. This interface down here is your loopback adapter. It's the local host. Even if your Linux system doesn't have an Ethernet interface installed at all, it'll always have at least one loopback interface because various system services use that interface to communicate. Also, be aware that up here with your actual interface, your wired or wireless interface, the name of the interface may or may not be eth0. On an older or newer Linux system, it might be named something else. The interface name is defined by what type of interface it is, wireless or wired. Other factors like whether that interface is integrated into the motherboard of the system or installed in an expansion slot can also affect the name. If we look at the output of the ifconfig command, we can see a lot of very important information. For example, you see inet is the IP version 4 address and netmask is the subnet mask that's been assigned to this interface. Broadcast specifies the broadcast address for the subnet that we're on. If IPv6 is running, then the IPv6 address is listed here under inet6 addresses. RX packets tell us how many packets have been received on this interface. There's some important statistics over here, such as errors, drops, and overruns. You can keep an eye on these parameters to see if any errors occur. We also have the transmit packets. These are the number of packets the system has transmitted. And we have the number of collisions listed too. Down here, we can see how many bytes of data we've received on this interface and how many bytes we've transmitted on this interface. As you can see, with ifconfig, you can view almost the same information that you can view with ipconfig on a Windows system. You can do some extra things with ifconfig that you can't do with ipconfig, like change the IP address or shut down an interface. Remember, to make changes, you have to enter the sudo command to switch to root. So I'm going to type clear to clear the contents of the terminal screen, and I'm going to enter sudo ifconfig eth0 down. Now let's do ifconfig and see our network interfaces. Notice that eth0 is gone. Now let's do sudo ifconfig eth0 up and enter ifconfig again. Now our interface is up again. That's it for this demonstration. In this demo, we looked at using the ifconfig command on a Linux system to view IP address configuration information. We also configured our interface to enter the down state and the up state.